the scientist.
Suffice it that the blood of 1,000 men and women was spilled within these walls. Limbs twisted and broken, eyes gouged from bloody sockets, flesh burned black.
Please. You await the dead. In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes. What you have to realize is that we're all just a mouse that a cat has by the tail.
The number you have reached, 911, has been changed to a non-published number.
Warning, the following show contains conservative posturing, radical Christian ideas, and may offend pagans, Wiccans, Islamic fundamentalists, and other unenlightened individuals. Callers and guests may be subjected to brash and offensive comments by the hosts and any other type of bullying tactics available. But that's okay. We know why you're here.
This concludes this test of the emergency broadcast system.
Tonight is August 17th, 2014.
Tonight I am sitting here with your co-host and my co-host Trent Lackey.
Yes, I'm here.
And we're also sitting with our friend D, or James. And we're also sitting here with our in-studio guest tonight, Reverend Aaron Long. I'm going to get into Mr. Long, or Reverend Long's, I'll let him get into his pedigree. I don't know it very well, even though I've known the man himself for, gosh knows, I don't know, a long time, since we were kids. And so as Trent, we've known, actually all four of us have known each other for ever. And tonight we have we all went different paths, and tonight we have someone that went the spiritual path. So we'll be talking about Vatican II and some of the things that happened with it. Reverend Long does hold a theological
Masters of Divinity.
Thank you, and some other good stuff. And so we'll get into that here in just a second as well. But I did want to mention something I thought was kind of neat. I was looking at this tonight is the night of the supermoon, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right because I really wasn't that big into science and astronomy and that kind of thing. But apparently, this supermoon is when the moon's going to appear 14% bigger and 30% brighter than the average full moon, and that's because the moon's going to turn full within the same hour that it's closest to us in its orbit around the Earth, and since it doesn't move around the Earth in a perfect circle, there are places in the orbit where the moon is actually closer to us and places where it's farther away, excuse my parlance. When it's farthest away, we say it's apogee or apogee, I guess. Apogee? Okay, so you know the science words, I don't. And when it's closest, it's perigee, I guess. So the technical term for the supermoon is a perigean full moon. In 1979, an astrologer came up with that term to describe a moon that turns full at its perigee. I'm getting this from an article in the LA Times. And since it was catchy, the name stuck. But apparently they're not really super rare. They occur on an average once every 13 months or so. And the summer sees the most. But I just thought that was interesting to bring up, that we've got the full moon tonight, as closest to the Earth as it possibly can be. But with that going on, I'm going to introduce you to Reverend Long. Reverend, tell us about your background.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. I was born in Davison County like the rest of you heathens, and grew up North Davison all the way. I have my Bachelor of Arts in English Literature from Western Carolina University, and I have my Masters of Divinity with a double concentration in Theology and Church History from Lancaster Theological Seminary and Divinity School.
That's in Pennsylvania, right?
Yes. I have done some studies at Philadelphia Seminary, at Gettysburg Seminary, and at Bethlehem Seminary during my tenure there. And through the course of my career in the ministry, I have taken an interest in the state of the church in the modern world.
Now, what's this Bible you have with you tonight? What is that?
It's a Lutheran Study Bible.
Okay. How does that differ from some of the other Bibles out there?
It is from a distinctly Lutheran standpoint, but it's produced by the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, which is a staunch group of old school Lutherans that came out of Germany during the time of the Prussian forcible union, whenever they tried to force the Reformed Church of Germany and the Lutheran Church of Germany to merge into the Prussian Union Evangelical Church.
Okay, you got to slow down. I'm going to stop you right there. I had no idea what you just said.
That's okay.
That's okay. I'm just.
You're supposed to just nod your head and pretend like
okay.
you got it going on.
They can't see me wink, right?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Carry on.
But
So you're not a pastor of a Lutheran church, is that correct?
no, not currently. I'm currently a pastor of an evangelical and Reformed church in Lexington, North Carolina.
Okay. Let's start talking about Vatican II a little bit. Some people that aren't Catholic, and I think a lot of our listeners aren't. I'm not Catholic. I didn't know about Vatican II until I just started getting interested in the Catholic sect of Christianity and what it all meant and things like that. Now, you're first and foremost, I want to say that you're what's the word? You're
Theoretically, I'm a Protestant pastor.
yeah. That wasn't what I was getting at though. But your ordination, you were ordained. You can trace your roots all the way back, right?
I am, because of the nature of the denomination in which I belong to and the history I come from, I stand within apostolic succession, which means that through the course of time, my ordination can be traced back to the apostles after Jesus at the end of the Gospel of St. John breathes upon them and says, "Receive my spirit. Those whose sins you retain, they shall be retained, and those whose sins you release, they shall be released."
So basically, you're tracing it all the way back to the very first, I guess,
Ordination service.
Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, tell us what Vatican II is. A lot of people don't know.
Vatican II was a movement within the Roman Catholic Communion that occurred during the 1960s. Pope John the 23rd, who has just recently been declared a saint by the Roman Church, started this movement to get the Mass translated into the vernacular. In order for him to do that, he had to call a conclave of all active ordained bishops within the Roman Communion in order to certify and approve all of this.
Let me put this in better lay person's context. Basically, the old Mass was in Latin, and people didn't understand it, and they wanted to convert it into English or to whatever language
Spanish,
you spoke.
Portuguese,
Yeah.
In nomine Patri, Filii, Spiritus Sancti.
Yeah. That. So, carry on. I'm sorry.
Well, John the 23rd calls this conclave. They bring all the bishops together, and then he mysteriously dies within 2 years of calling the conclave before it's over with.
Okay. We'll get back to that in a minute, but go ahead.
During the course of the conclave, Pope Paul VI, who was the Bishop of Milan, ends up being elected by the cardinals to take the papal see. When Paul VI takes the papal see, he changes the direction of the conclave from a revamping of the Catholic Mass and a revamping of the nature of the church as far as language into something to change the church from its very foundations onward.
Okay, so what you're saying, at first it's John the 23rd just wants to get the Mass translated. That's the only thing he wants to do. And then he dies in the middle of the conclave, which is just, if you ever played Mage the Ascension, it's a giant... I'm just saying, that's where I know the word, Scott, okay? A conclave is where the wizards come together. I'm sorry, you're a minister, I get that. But, a grouping of all these global dudes talking about trying to do that, right?
Global dudes.
But then he dies mysteriously, and then all of a sudden,
into something more.
And then it turns into something more. Okay,
Something that it wasn't meant to turn into.
Well,
but I guess to move the truck along or the boat along a little bit more here, is you were saying that all this was predicted in the Fatima, right?
Yes, and if your listeners don't know what Fatima is, in 1917 in Portugal, there were these 3 children who were shepherds that received a series of visions starting with an angel and leading to the Virgin Mary. During the course of their last vision, there was a large grouping and gathering of people, atheists, communists, secularists, that had come to see the children to try to stop them, and then they saw the sun dance in the sky. It was reported by a lot of newspapers during the time period, and it's a verifiable miraculous occurrence.
Yeah, I'm very aware. I think there's a couple of TV programs about Fatima, if I remember correctly.
Well, one of the things that the children received at Fatima was what is called the Fatima message, and it came in a series of these visions. In the first vision, the children were taken by the Virgin Mary and shown heaven and hell. and shown that if people do not start turning from their wickedness and turning once again to God, that all of these souls will be damned into eternal hellfire for all eternity.
That seemed to work out pretty well, since we all turned back to God, right? I mean,
Yeah, we all did.
Yeah.
Highly religious society. Go ahead.
The second vision had to do with an accurate revelation of the fact that Russia would be taken over and converted to a communist atheistic doctrine. Now, you may say that doesn't sound like anything if they'd have read the newspapers. You must remember that this vision was given to illiterate children who lived in Portugal in a time period that they couldn't get newspapers where they're living.
No CNN.
No CNN or Fox News.
And if
you're
they had it, they
actually a
couldn't read it
godly
anyway.
Christian man.
Exactly.
They couldn't read it anyway.
Amen. Preach it, brother. So basically, they predict. But this Fatima also predicted this Vatican II.
Oh, it gets even better. We're not even done with the second.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
They also, it was revealed to them that there would be much suffering and that there would be a second world war. Now, this is occurring during the last days of the First World War, which everybody thought would be, quote unquote, the war to end all wars. So these children received this message that there would be this Second World War, and they were also given an accurate prediction of who would be the Pope during this time. It was one of the Piuses. So they receive all this information to justify and verify that these are true revelations. But to me, what is the most interesting aspect of the whole thing comes down to what is called the third secret of Fatima. The third secret of Fatima, as is officially been revealed by the Roman Communion, is this image of a white-robed bishop trudging up a mountain through a war-torn street, being followed by other priests and bishops and cardinals, and eventually being shot. Now, this is the official vision that is given by the Roman Communion. And it has been given ever since we have the episode of John Paul II being shot by the assassin. Because John Paul II believed that he was the fulfillment of this vision.
Really? I remember that assassination tip. It was like the late 70s, and didn't John Paul actually go to the prison and talk to his assassin, right?
Once again, we see that the Crusades did not complete their work because the Muslims shot John Paul.
A Muslim? No. The religion of peace?
I wonder what year that happened when he got assassinated. It was
1981.
Okay.
So no. Well, but I thought the vision explicitly dealt with the Pope going up a mountain.
See, this is the thing. This vision is the one that has been formally promulgated by the Roman Communion. There are those out there, and I being one, that believe that this is not what the children saw. Two of the children died in childhood. Juanita and I can't remember the other one's name, but they were children. The little boy and one of the little girls died. The third survived and lived up until 2002 as a nun in a Carmelite order.
Wow.
Where she continued to receive revelations from God. And she said that when this information on the third secret was revealed, it was not the truth or the fullness of her vision. Because the vision she was given not only showed this white bishop trudging up this mountain in a war-torn scene, it also said that the church would be filled with the smoke of Satan.
Huh.
Now, the interesting thing about that is, and I don't know if anybody's ever talked about Father Malachi Martin on this show.
No, all the time.
Yeah, no,
all the time.
Yeah.
Father Malachi Martin, to recap for anyone who's not heard about this, was a Jesuit priest during the time of Vatican II and served as one of the adjuncts to the bishops that were meeting in conclave. He, at the end of Vatican II, ends up petitioning the Jesuit order to leave his vows, not his priesthood, but his vows to the Jesuit order because of the corruption that he has seen. Now, Father Malachi Martin went on to write numerous books that are worth anybody reading, including Hostage to the Devil,
Yeah, I couldn't get through that, yeah.
Modern Exorcism.
Did you get through that, Trent?
I did.
Did you finally?
Well, the thing is, I mean, if you don't know Hostage, it's a book about a series of exorcisms. All of us have read it, and you couldn't do it. A number of people actually stop at some point.
We'd start it, and then we put it down.
Yeah. The thing is, is the one that got me was the very last one. That's probably the reason why
You made it all the way through.
because that's the one that got me. The tortoise and
The tortoise and the rooster.
I think. Anyway,
Yes.
go ahead.
But anyway, Malachi Martin wrote that. He wrote Jesuits. If you've ever been to Barnes & Noble and looked at the Christian section, every Barnes & Noble I've ever been in has a copy of this huge book on the history of the Jesuits. The one that gets left out and could, I dare say, gets pushed out is a novel he wrote called Windswept House. Windswept House is a fictional historical retelling of what occurred during and following Vatican II. And in this novel, he speaks of the smoke of Satan entering into the see of St. Peter. Now, as you dig into this whole image, this whole idea, there's several other priests who want to remain anonymous in the sources, but speak of there being a satanic mass that was held in St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome, as well as one being held in Charleston, South Carolina, where there was the sacrifice of small children unto Satan during the course of the ending of Vatican II.
Of course, it would have been in Charleston. Where else?
I have no idea why in the
Well,
world they chose
there's-
Charleston.
Yeah, there's one good person in Charleston, yeah, my friend. But I guess,
He probably wasn't a part of this.
No, he wasn't there at the time. No. That's crazy. So human sacrifice basically is what these undisclosed sources are saying happened around the same time of Vatican II.
Well, what makes it even more interesting is that at the end of Vatican II, when all the documents were promulgated, what we saw was a complete and utter destruction of the historic faith. I can give you some examples. The biggest one to me was the placement of the priest during Mass. Now, I know for lay people that doesn't make a lot of sense, but pre-Vatican II, during the Vatican I time, the priest faced the altar, therefore offering up the holy sacrifice of the Eucharist unto God.
So they didn't face the crowd.
No, because the act of the offering up of the sacrifice was the vehicle through which the doctrine of transubstantiation, or if you're Lutheran, consubstantiation, they're both functionally the same, occurs. Now, layman's terms, I'm using 50-cent words here.
Transubstantiation basically is a belief that when you partake of communion and you eat the bread and you drink the wine, that it actually magically changes to the blood and body of Christ in your body. Is that correct?
Yep.
Correct.
All right.
Following Vatican II, we see the priest being positioned behind the altar facing the people. So the sacrifice is now gone from being a ritual between the priest and God to being a magical ritual between the priest and the people, excluding God from the service.
Huh.
Interesting.
As you look through the translation of the Mass, you also see the exclusion of doctrines of hell. You see the exclusion of doctrines of original sin. You see the exclusion of doctrines of the inerrancy and inspired nature of God's Word.
Well, that sounds really paganish.
Yeah, what was that again? Hell and the original sin, and what was the third one?
The inspired and inerrant nature of God's Word.
Yeah.
Okay, what is
Because
that?
Protestants around the world don't realize the Roman Catholic Communion until Vatican II believed that the Bible was God's inspired and inerrant Word.
Well-
that God gave the Bible to people in a format that it could not
That's
err.
why me and John Zaffis got in that argument, because he's Roman Catholic. I said, it's the Word of God. I said, it's the Bible. I said, that's it. I'm the Word, Word's me, the whole thing.
Pre-Vatican II, Roman Catholicism believed in that. The Orthodox Church believes in that. The thing is they add human tradition to it, or church tradition to it.
Sure.
But it doesn't take away from the fact that they believe in the Bible as being God's inspired and inerrant Word, and that all faith and doctrine and practice must agree with it.
What happened to, where did Purgatory and things like that come from?
Purgatory actually stems from a reading of the book of Maccabees. And if you don't know what Maccabees is there were these books of the Bible that were written in what is called the intertestamental period.
Non-canonized books.
Well, it depends on what tradition you come from.
Okay.
But there's a period of time between the closing of the book of Malachi, which happened around 400 BC, and I will obstinately refuse to use the terms BCE and CE.
That's fine. Yeah, no, we get it. You're go ahead.
I don't plan on going to hell anytime soon. But
So you're planning on going later. Sorry, Reverend. It's too easy.
Awesome.
But anyway, there is a period of time between the closing of the book of Malachi, who would have been the last prophet of Israel, which happened around 400 BC, and the time of the birth of Christ, which would have occurred around 3 BC to 0.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, I'm sorry. Are the Jewish people still in captivity, or they are back in Israel at this time?
During this period, the Jewish people have come back into Israel. They have reestablished the second temple.
Okay.
But immediately following that, what you have is the rise of Alexander the Great. And during the course of the rise of Alexander the Great, what you had was Alexander's need to Hellenize all of the known world. In this process, what you had was a Hellenization of the Jews, where they were trying to perform surgeries to reverse circumcision. And you get to the point.
How do you do that?
They
Sew it back on.
Sewed skin back on your penis.
What? I'm sorry, what?
So I guess this is other people's skin then? Because
Yes.
you would think of the original.
Or animal skin.
Yeah. Oh,
Did
great.
that work?
Well, just imagine sewing dead skin onto the end of your penis.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Probably not.
Not probably horrific pain, I would imagine.
I'm sure.
But anyway, this culminates in the Seleucids, who were one of the empires left after Alexander's death,
One of the generals of Alexander,
Right.
if I remember correctly.
sacrificing a pig on the altar to God at the temple. At which point, this party within Israel called the Maccabees, which literally translates from Hebrew into the hammer. They were the Hebrew hammer, so to speak.
The hammer.
But the Maccabees rose up to cast these Greeks out and fought and established a period of independence for Israel until the Romans came back in and took it over.
Okay.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Maccabees because there's other books too. I know
Judith, Tobit.
Enoch. I know there's a lot of books, and I don't know. I know some are pseudepigrapha, some are apocrypha. I don't really know the differences between the two. I just know that I know Enoch is a book that's often quoted when we talk about one of the big theories here that L.A. Marzulli and people like him are behind about the alien, the UFOs being, part of the whole giant race that was created when the
Nephilim.
Yes, thank you. And I've been reading his book, actually. It's very interesting stuff. But, they talk about Enoch and they quote Enoch a lot. But, I've read other things where it says, well, Enoch doesn't agree with the rest of the Bible in certain parts of it. So they think that part of it was written, the earlier part of it was written at the same time, and maybe that's good, but the rest of it may have been added 2 years later and it's not good. And
I have 2 statements about the book of Enoch.
okay, let's hear him.
Number 1, the book of Enoch is quoted in our New Testament canon
It
in
is.
St.
It is.
Jude.
Yes.
Number 2, the book of Enoch was never meant to be read by the laity. It is a dangerous book for the laity to have in their hands because of the misinterpretations of the heavy level of spirituality that is contained therein. And it is better because there is, in my opinion, no such thing as aliens. What we see as grays and greens are Satan's way of deceiving us in this modern age of Satan, where they
Oh,
have
good.
come
Someone finally agrees with me on the show. I like this.
and presented themselves to us in order to lure away the weak-minded and the.
But do you believe, as L.A. Marzulli believes, and we're going to take a short break here in just a minute, but let me get this answer out of you real quick. Do you believe, as L.A. Marzulli believes, that this could be the vehicle for the great deception of seeing all these large motherships all over and them coming down and saying, no such thing as God. We created you, and we're coming back. And his more fuller theory of his is that he not only did they create you and that we're coming back and telling you there is no God, but that part of the process that he has with these people going up and then coming back with these implants in them is that they're trying to structure something and finally get it right one day to where they can plug it into your DNA, and that becomes the mark of the beast. And take this because this will make you live forever. This will change your genetics. And since we're the ones that created you, now we're going to make you right.
Absolutely. I agree with that in full force.
Oh, wow. We should get you guys talking. That'll be interesting. Anyway, we're going to take a short break. You're listening to World of the Unexplained. We're with Reverend Aaron Long tonight, and we will be right back right after this. We're discussing all kinds of things. I'm going to let Reverend Long take over if that's all right.
With the purgatory, I think where the last question was talking about purgatory and talking about Maccabees.
In the book of Maccabees, there's a verse where it speaks of the Jews praying for their dead. The doctrine of purgatory originates with this, and with the development of St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, it gets perpetuated into this idea that an all-holy God cannot bear the presence of sin. Therefore, those who are saved yet still are in a state of venial sin must go through a period of purgation before they can enter into heaven. It's not actually something that is necessarily against Protestant doctrine or Orthodox doctrine. It's an idea that is extra, above and beyond what could be normally accepted. Because it's not saying that you must go through purgatory and that you're saved in purgatory. It's saying that people who are saved when they die, yet die in a state of venial sin, must be purgated before they can enter in before an all-holy God.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Actually, I will also point out that Dante's Purgatorio is a pretty good read. And then the last one, he's talking about heaven's pretty lame, but, you know, it's just that's my only contribution to purgatory is just that.
And Trent, this is why of all my friends, I pray for you more than any of the rest.
No, heaven's not good enough. This is nice. I'll just stay here. I'm sorry.
So, do you, is your being a pastor is one of your what are your thoughts on the once saved always saved Protestant?
Well, number one, the idea of once saved, always saved does not show up in the concepts perpetuated by the Reformers. The idea of once saved, always saved grew out of the great evangelical revivals of the Great Awakening. And what it is this idea that God will save you if you confess Jesus Christ as Lord, and then you can go on living your life whatever way you want to. That's clearly not what the Bible teaches. What the Bible teaches is that salvation is in and of itself a journey, baptism being the point at which you start. But if you read some of the great divines of the Protestants of the ages before, like John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, you see this idea of salvation being a journey.
Sure.
Just to remind people, the Great Awakening was a moment of religious fervor during the early American period. I want to say it was almost pre-Revolutionary War.
There were two Great Awakenings.
Well,
the first one
Which one are you talking about?
Well, it comes mostly out of the Second Great Awakening.
All right.
Because George Whitefield and all of them in the First Great Awakening were actually very orthodox. It was in the Second Great Awakening that you get Finney and the Anxious Bench and all of the modern psycho-terrorist techniques to convert people to Christianity.
Yeah, Charles Grandison Finney, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the American Bible Society. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying.
But it's also where you get Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses, which are two of the greatest hellspawn derivations from the faith that we have.
So where do you think that, where do you think that what do you think about the that premise?
Which premise?
Once saved, always saved.
What I think is that we have two things going on. Number one, we have an omniscient, all-knowing God that can look down the halls of history and can see who shall accept him and who shall not. I believe that there is an idea of predestination that you must accept from reading the pages of Holy Scripture. At the same time, I have to come to the understanding and the recognition that I am not God in and of myself. Therefore, neither I nor anyone else can know the mind of God. My duty is to embrace the free will that we have been given and to live my Christian witness in such a way that I show forth Christ daily in my walk and in my journey through this world.
So the simple answer is I don't know. Is my mic not working?
No, it is.
It is now? Okay, good.
That's very similar to kind of steer us back to Catholicism. St. Augustine basically implied that you had free will, but the free will was to turn away from God's path, or follow God's path. That was your free will.
Correct.
Okay. Let's get back to Vatican.
Sorry.
Vatican II. You said that there were problem 1 and problem 2 was doctrinal with Vatican II. What other kind of problems were happening at the time with this that you have?
Well, in the faith, doctrinal problems are the source and the root of all other problems.
Okay, that makes sense.
The big influence came from the Masonic orders, which got their tentacles into the church starting during the French Revolution and forward. Now, for those of you who do not know what the Masons are a group of Hermetics that come out of the ancient esoteric traditions of Egypt and of Solomon and of the Greeks. The Masons managed to go underground until the time of the Templar Knights during the Crusades, at which point the Templars brought back these Gnostic and esoteric texts, reintroduced them. Now, the Templars practiced them openly until such a point in time as they were put down.
The famous Friday the 13th?
Yeah, where Friday the 13th comes from, only there's no Jason Voorhees.
Well, yeah, he might have been there.
He might have.
You know, I mean, he might have worked for the church. I'm sorry.
Was that famous Friday the 13th in October?
I don't know.
Yes, it was.
That's what I thought it was.
Okay, go ahead.
That's why I always correct people and say, no, it's not Friday the 13th. It has to be in October, and that only happens every so many years.
Anyway, when the Templars were put down, they were taken over by these Masonic craft guilds. And when I say Masonic craft guilds at this point in time, during the medieval period, there was guilds that maintained all crafts. There would have been a blacksmith's guild and a weaver's guild and a mason's guild that regulated the production of whatever products they produced.
Yeah, and quality too, right?
Correct.
That's where the masterpiece concept come from, apprenticeship. Okay.
Well, in this, they ended up developing secret societies in order to maintain a stranglehold on the knowledge that they had. These Templars hid themselves within the Masonic craft guilds and ended up creating what is known as a non-practicing Mason. What that means is a Mason who doesn't actually practice Masonry. They became known as the Freemasons. The Freemasons managed to infiltrate all levels of society. It has been hypothesized that after Luther started the genuine reforms, the Freemasons latched on to the Protestant Reformation and ended up carrying out their most diabolical designs, creating things like Unitarianism and Universalism. Unitarianism means a rejection of the Trinity. Universalism means that everyone is going to heaven. That means Adolf Hitler is in heaven.
Yeah.
Oh, kind of like our new Pope believes.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, Adolf Hitler was in hell, and Rich Anders saved him.
That's right. I forgot.
Right. Yeah,
And Frank Sinatra too, right?
That's right.
Anyway.
So the Freemasons are infiltrating Protestantism,
Correct.
So that simultaneously they're in Catholicism too. And how does their
all right.
where's their game? Where's their horse in the game called Vatican II?
We're getting to that if you would be patient.
The horse in the game called
That didn't
Vatican
even make
II.
sense, Trent.
Horses can be.
Where's their horse in the game?
Why are
called
we
Vatican
mixing
II?
metaphors, Trent?
Cause I can, Aaron. Cause I can. All right, the horse in the game.
You will refer to me as the Right Reverend.
Right, Reverend. Right, Reverend.
Moving along.
Yeah. Where's the influence
He's getting
of
there,
Vatican
man. He's getting there.
II? Okay.
Moving along. The Masons developed a stranglehold within Protestantism, as is seen by the Protestant denominations in America and the proliferation of Masonic craft guilds in America. George Washington, our first president, was a Master Mason. And if you look at the diagram and the layout of Washington, D.C., it forms a perfect pentagram.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Masons were also very heavily behind the French Revolution. And during the course of the French Revolution, they tried to exterminate the Roman Catholic communion within France. In this time period, though, they came to the realization that the Roman Catholic faith was so deeply rooted within the French consciousness that they would never be able to exterminate it. So what they did instead was they started to infiltrate. St. John Vianney writes about this. Pope Pius XVI writes about this, and so on and so forth, to the point where what you have with Pope Pius X is a complete rejection of Masonic orders, to the point where Pius X, in one of his papal encyclicals, issues a bull saying that if you are found to be a Mason in the Roman Catholic Communion, you shall be excommunicado, which means kicked out of the church
Right.
and denied the gates of heaven and paradise forever.
When did that happen with Pius X?
That's a good question. I can't
Sometime
remember.
after the Revolution, or-
Right, it was after the Revolution.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, these Masons slowly infiltrated the hierarchies of the church, coming to a fore with Teilhard de Chardin. Now, I don't know if any of you guys know who Teilhard de Chardin is.
Not at all, but I love the name. Sounds fun.
Teilhard de Chardin was a Jesuit priest who was at the same time an anthropologist and an archaeologist. Have you ever heard of Peking Man?
I have, yes.
Teilhard de Chardin is the one who discovered the Peking Man in China in an archaeological dig.
And that happened. I'm terrible with dates, so it was either mid 19th century or late or anyway. I don't talk about dates. I'm sorry.
Anyway, Teilhard de Chardin developed a theology at the University of Paris that was based on this concept of the evolutionary theory, taking Darwin's works and Hegel's philosophy of the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis, and combining them with Christian theology to where Christ is no longer a man, he becomes the Übermensch. And this idea of the Übermensch, and we're not talking about it necessarily in Nietzsche's terms, we're talking about it in a Darwinistic Hegelian form.
Okay. Yeah. What Aaron is saying here is that Jesus is like the Superman. He's the most powerful of the men at the time because Darwinism and
Jesus Christo ist ein Übermensch.
okay, yeah, Jesus Christ is the Superman, not superstar. Superman. See how I had the Broadway musical into that?
Well, I see that.
That's pretty cool.
That sounded pretty gay, Trent.
It did.
Moving along.
Go on.
Teilhard de Chardin starts perpetuating this false theology, and because of his recognition as being this famous philosopher and this famous anthropologist, archaeologist, it starts to permeate the very texture of the institutions of higher education. Now, you must remember, at the same time, higher criticism of the Bible is developing within the Protestant communion, which is causing people to lose faith in God's inspired and inerrant word. These come together in a marriage in the universities during the 1920s and the 1930s. What you see through Karl Barth and a couple of other contemporary theologians of that time period is a reaction against this, but it never overcame it, to the point where the Masons took over the education of the priests and the pastors. In doing so, what that meant is they could get into the local churches and disseminate their hell-worthy heresy out amongst the local populace, therefore taking over the minds of the people and establishing themselves in a place of power, which in the Roman Catholic Communion culminates in Vatican II.
So Masons are bad, okay?
Well, anybody that has spent any time studying the Masons and their higher degree rituals of drinking blood and semen and urine
that's
should
disgusting.
understand that.
That's nice. Yeah, my great uncle's a Mason.
He might be one of those drinking beer Masons, which the vast majority of the Masonic orders I can't necessarily condemn because a lot of this information is kept secret.
Yeah.
It's only when you start reading into things like Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma of the Masons and you see the Luciferic initiation rites, which occur at the higher degrees, that you really get to wrap your mind around a lot of this stuff. Albert Pike, if anybody didn't know, was a general within the Confederate Army who in the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite of the Masons in America ended up establishing essentially a Masonic church within America in the Masonic lodges, where Masons develop their own baptismal and funeral rites, Masons develop their own marriage rites, and so on and so forth. You still see it at Masonic funerals because Albert Pike's Masonic funeral has been perpetuated. If you've ever been to a Mason's funeral, they're buried wearing their full regalia. The Masons also, because they ended up adopting Joseph Smith into one of their lodges in New York, managed to infiltrate within the Mormon church, which is why you have all the secret temple rites in Mormonism, as well as if you've ever been to a Mormon funeral, the Mormons are buried according to very strange and very strict practices.
Huh. Masons are busy.
So Masons are bad and Mormons are bad. Okay.
Well, I mean,
And Darwin's bad.
Okay.
Darwin's bad. Okay.
All right, look. So the Masons, we got a little brief history of that, and they infiltrate like universities, religious universities at least, and they infiltrate.
Well, you've read Harnack, haven't you?
I have not. No,
You've read about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
Who's Dietrich Bonhoeffer?
Dietrich Bonhoeffer was the great Christian martyr that wrote Cost of Discipleship and was executed by Hitler in one of the concentration camps before the end of the world.
I recognize
World War. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I recognize the name, and I do remember that. But but here's the thing about secret societies and organizations. I mean, it's a bit like religions, in the fact that, well, as you have clearly pointed out, religions change over time. Societies of people change over time. And I guess the Masons are changing over time. So what is keeping the powers that be in the Catholic Church, the Masonic powers that be in the Catholic Church, in lockstep with the powers that be in Mason infiltration in Protestant churches? You follow me?
Before we end up getting into what you just said, let me make a statement about what you just said.
Okay.
Religion in its truest form does not change over time. If you don't believe me, study the actual Hebrew of the Dead Sea Scrolls. If you read the Hebrew of the Dead Sea Scrolls, it reads exactly like the Hebrew that the Septuagint text of the Old Testament came from, to the point which there is no derivation. And we are looking at a time period that lasted for over 2,000 years. You name one text that was hand copied over the course of 2,000 years that did not have changes in it. God has maintained and established his church using the words of Jesus Christ to where the gates of hell shall not overcome it. Now, we may argue over what is the exact nature of the true church, but the true church will never be able to be overcome by Satan. Therefore, religion does not change over time. The doctrines of Christ were given by Christ to the apostles, who transmitted them to the bishops, who came together at the Council of Nicaea in 325 at the order of the Emperor Constantine, who had been revealed before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, the symbol of the Chi-Rho, by with this you shall conquer, and came up with the Nicene Creed and closed out the completion of the canon of the Scriptures, which is maintained inviolate up to this present day, to the point to which now they are having to actually go through these evil groups with translations such as the NRSV and alter the actual words of Greek and Hebrew therein in order to promulgate their doctrines purposefully. If you read the preface to the NRSV translation of the Holy Scriptures, you will see, because of the nature of inclusive language, they are changing the Greek to promulgate their doctrine, because the Bible has been able to be maintained through that course of time.
Interesting. So what do you think the best or the closest Bible is? Would you say it would be the New King James or the Old King James, or what version? Boy, you're using some Lutheran study Bible.
Let me preface this with the most accurate form of the Bible is what is known as the Textus Receptus. Now, for the laity, what that is it is the Greek, Hebrew, and Latin text that has been passed down since the time of Christ. For your average layperson, what that means is the translations that come therefrom are the official translations. For Roman Catholics, that would mean the Douay-Rheims translation. For Protestants, that would mean the King James and the New King James, or the Amplified Bible. For the Orthodox, if you don't use the Textus Receptus, you're not considered to be a Christian, because they use it in their pure Greek form in the Septuagint and the Greek New Testament, or in the Orthodox Study Bible and its translation.
Well, I was reading. It was interesting because I was reading a book. I can't remember the name of the author, but it was one of those books. talked about the origins of the Bible, and talked about how, this one went this way and this one went through the Roman Catholic Church, and the one that went through the Roman Catholic Church is bad. Basically saying at the end of it, for the lay people, that the King James Version is the best translation.
Well, a lot of that comes from the Know-Nothing Party that arose out of the Second Great Awakening. The Know-Nothing Party practices a form of Christian theology called dispensationalism. Now, let me put this in layman's terms. You ever read the Left Behind series?
Yes.
That's dispensational theology. It's based off a misreading of a verse in 1 Thessalonians that in Latin translation says raptura. Well, that's where you get this idea of the rapture. The rapture is not promulgated anywhere in the Bible in the form that it is.
Sure.
But because of the shock value that you can derive out of dispensational theology, it became the predominant American form of theology.
Do you believe in the rapture?
No.
Do you believe that Christ gathers up those after the Antichrist and after the tribulation?
Number one, I believe what Jesus himself said, which was, I neither know the day nor the hour, so no one can predict my coming. Number two, I believe if you read the book of Revelation in the Greek, or you read the book of Daniel in the Greek or the Hebrew, what is implied is that the world will progressively come to a point of such great sinfulness to which the mark of the beast is being applied and the church is being corrupted and destroyed to such a point that it looks like everything's going to fall in on itself and Jesus shall return.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So it's that time again. Don't worry about the music. We'll go out without any music here. You're listening to World of the Unexplained. We're going to be right back. We're speaking tonight with Reverend Aaron Long.
What Scott's actually saying is Trent's going to sing during the break.
Well, if you want me to, I will.
We'll be right back after a short break. Thanks. And we're back. You're listening to The World of the Unexplained. This is Jay Scott.
This is Trent Lackey.
And tonight
this is Reverend Long.
Tonight our guest is the Reverend Aaron Long. And we were talking about
Vatican. Well, I mean,
a lot of things.
Yeah, we're.
The second
The second album. 1 dozen melodies. Okay,
See, Trent did sing.
Yeah, I did. Vatican II. Let's talk about it some more.
Well, with this growing Masonic influence within the church, when the satanic Mass was held under the reign of Pope Paul VI, what you see is an increase in the idea of universalism within the Roman Communion. This has been very explicitly stated within the Big Ugly Green Book, otherwise known as the Catechism of the Roman Catholic Church. In this book, they say that there are other paths to salvation than Christ, an explicit contrast to what Jesus himself says in the 14th chapter of St. John's Gospel when he says that he is the way and the truth and the life, and no one may enter in unto the Father except through him. We see an acceptance of Buddhist tenets and Hindu tenets. We see the Roman Catholic Communion accepting Islam as being the same God as God the Father, which we all know Allah clearly is not God, but a demon who Muhammad managed to worship at the great Kaaba in Mecca. Allah historically was an Arabic moon god who was married to Ashtaroth, who the ancient Jews fought against with their Asheroth poles.
Did not know that.
Yeah, you know,
Didn't
I was
either.
thinking like a moon goddess, you know, I mean, that's, yeah, I know what you're talking about, an Arabic moon goddess. It's, what is her name in the Babylonian, not the Sumerian, Inanna, and Inanna becomes like
Ishtar.
Tammuz,
Ishtar.
Isis.
Yeah.
It's all the same, like, goddess type.
Worship.
Well,
We
how
see
does a goddess become a, like a uber masculine
Dude.
deity, like you find in Islam?
Well, number one, Muhammad in and of himself was a merchant. And as a merchant, much like lawyers who are all probably going to hell in some way, shape, or form.
Cheap staff.
You can't see you blinking over the microphone.
Merchants have to learn how to be able to speak with the quote-unquote silver tongue. Muhammad, seeking power for himself over the warring Arabic tribes, ends up fabricating a story of the message of the angel Gabriel coming to him in this cave outside of Mecca. Through this fabricated story, he managed to unify all of these warring Arabic tribes into one cohesive unit.
And get himself a bunch of wives at the same time.
Well, one of which, his last wife, was 8 years old when they got married, and they thought he was exemplary because he didn't sleep with her until she was 10.
That was nice of him, you know.
It was not a couple of years to...
You know, I remember the stories about, you know, these stories that he would tell about having to climb the ladder and continue to ask God, you know, don't, you know, what did it start out something like 100 times a day you had to pray, and then 50, and they kept bargaining with God to get it down to 5.
Actually, what the historians and the archaeologists have discovered is that Islam was a very mutable religion in its beginning times, because what Muhammad did was adopt practices to convert other groups. There was a point in time where the Muslims were required to pray 3 times a day, and they were required to pray towards Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Which comes exactly from the book of Daniel. This was done so that Muhammad could convert the Jews that lived in Mecca to his side to turn against his enemies.
Interesting.
And then, well, you know, there's that concept of being a merchant and trying to sell a religion. Basically.
Correct.
Okay, well,
hucksters have existed throughout history.
Hucksters. I applaud you for using the word huckster. You know, grifting people. And so you're saying Islam was just a
snake oil
religion of snake oil salesmen.
Well, it originally started out as a religion of snake oil salesmen, but the devil soon, like everything else, took it over and converted it into a religion of the sword. I don't know if any of you have paid attention to this ISIS situation that's going on currently, but ISIS is a group of Muslims attempting to reestablish the caliphate.
Yes.
What the caliphate is the universal Muslim faith and government all rolled into one, governed under Sharia law, which comes from the sayings of the Hadiths, which were promulgated by Muhammad himself.
Exactly.
I'm going to add something to that because of an article that I just read about.
Of course.
Erbil, right? Erbil is in the news. You know, it's the farthest eastern city. You know,
Yeah.
it has Americans in it. Well, the thing is about Erbil, also known historically as Arbela, there is, in fact, an ancient temple to the moon goddess that we just talked about, and eventually Inanna, Ishtar, Isis, right? And then the
Correct.
group's name is ISIS. I don't know. I'm just throwing whirlybirds out there, but you know, the group's names is ISIS. They're trying to take over a city that once held an ancient temple to Isis. What do you
Right.
think of that?
Well, it's once again the devil using his tools to accomplish his end goals. It should have sparked off in everyone's mindset, but because of the moral relativism that has crept in through the 1960s, through the liberation movements, through all of the progressive movements within the government, as well as through the Masonic influences within the church, we no longer see the truth as being absolute. Truth has become a relative concept. All of that I'm going to bring back to this issue of the Muslims. In ISIS, what you see is this idea promulgated by Muhammad that people can be converted by the sword. It comes out in what the Muslims have said to the Yazidis and to the native Kurdish Christians, where they said either you confess Allah and convert to Islam, or you pay this exorbitant extortion tax rate, or we kill you. It's been playing out with them murdering children.
Yes.
I think it is a travesty what we see on the news today that we would even consider supporting the Palestinians or any other
I agree.
Islamic group, because they are against the whole concept of America or of Christianity in and of itself.
Preach it.
That's what you do. Okay, so this ugly green book that you're talking about, and it talks about alternate paths to salvation. What else is happening in the Catechism of the Roman CC?
Well, what we see outside of the Catechism is this development of women within the Roman Catholic Church, and instead of developing in a godly manner, what has happened is the Wicca groups have infiltrated the nunneries, and these women have embraced radical feminism. as nuns and are demanding the priesthood when the Bible clearly teaches that a priest, a preacher, a pastor, all of it goes back to the same Greek word, presbyterios, which can be literally translated into elder, must be a man. I don't know many women that are the husband of but one wife. Do you?
No.
Is that a possibility?
No.
Well, with modern medicine, maybe.
Well,
Modern medicine. Oh, wow. That's
yeah.
great. Yeah.
Okay,
that's great.
so Wiccan women's lib in the nunneries. What about the monasteries?
Well, the monasteries are quickly dying off because of moral relativism and the fact that through the sexual revolution, men can have sex with whoever they want to now, and with modern agricultural methodology, people have no need for the monastic life anymore.
Okay. So, but the nunneries, I'm assuming, are going full and strong then?
They're taking a hit in and of themselves, but your more radical feminists have started to gravitate toward them.
Okay. What else in the Catechism? What else we got?
Well, that's all I got right off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, all right. So Vatican II makes all these changes in the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, that's a very ambitious goal. You know, first of all, just simply like the original intent to translate the Mass into all of the relevant languages. I mean, the Catholic Church is worldwide. You know, in Asia, Africa, South America, et cetera, et cetera. How else are they able to? I mean, are they? So when Pius VI is causing this thing to happen,
Paul VI.
Paul VI. I'm sorry. Yeah, Pius X. That was. How do you keep those guys together? Anyway.
You just got to remember a couple.
Yeah, I guess so. So the translation.
And don't trust any pope named Innocent.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
And I'm not even joking about that.
When Dante was.
Oh
writing
yeah,
this,
the Innocents. That was one of the Medici popes.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, they were some
Right.
rough business.
Anyway, so how do they plan on carrying this out with Vatican II? I mean, what's the machinery to change the doctrine and to get all of these priests to buy in?
That's the great thing, because the Vatican I, the Pope was proclaimed to be the supreme pontiff of the Church. Therefore, when the Pope sits ex cathedra, big fancy Latin word that simply means when the Pope sits in communicado, in communication with all the bishops, the Pope speaks infallibly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the conclave, that's what he was
Once
doing.
the conclave makes the pronouncement with the Pope sitting on the papal throne, it is automatically entered into dogma and doctrine of
It's
the
the
Roman
Word
Catholic
of God,
Church,
basically.
so it cannot be denied by the faithful.
Wow.
But there have been faithful that have seen these problems. If you want to go to your internet and look up the Pius X Society, or you want to look up Father Gruner or Father Malachi Martin, all of these were priest and priestly societies, the Priestly Society of St. Peter, that saw the problems being created. So what you end up getting is a movement called the Sede Vaticanus, which means that the Vatican chair has been empty since the death of Paul the 23rd.
Wow.
John the 23rd, excuse
Yeah.
me.
Okay.
Oh, there's even more fun with this.
Okay.
Because after the death of Paul VI, there was the next cardinal in line that everybody sort of knew was going to be Pope. Can't remember his actual name, but he was John Paul I. And his primary purpose was to reverse every decision made by Vatican II.
Oh, wow.
Well, what is interesting is Paul VI, knowing he was going to die, ended up instituting one final papal dictum, which was that a pope could not undergo an autopsy. Then, a couple of weeks later, Paul VI dies. John Paul I is elected. 30 days after he's elected,
He dies mysteriously.
And
They think he's poisoned.
they think he's poisoned, but they can't do
An autopsy to prove it.
to find out and prove it. But they knew he was going to reverse all the decisions.
Huh. Okay.
Wow.
So I mean, basically, what you're saying is
Conspiracy of the Catholic Church to kill the Pope.
but there's in fact
It wouldn't
movements-
be the first time.
Yeah, but I mean, but there are movements within the Catholic Church who basically see, well, the writing on the wall, to use a pun, you know, and they're actively working against Vatican II, at least what it turned into, right?
Well, you see it in the rise of the Latin Mass once again within the Roman Catholic Communion. In Mount Airy, the Roman Catholic Church in Mount Airy.
Of all places.
Actually, yeah, I know, it's strange.
Mount Airy, North Carolina.
Mayberry.
Home of Andy Griffith.
That's right.
Anyway, the Roman Catholic Church in Mount Airy actually does the Tridentine Mass in Latin every Sunday.
Wow. Interesting.
So there is a blowback. And the thing is what's even funnier is Benedict XVI, who was one of the architects of Vatican II, felt some guilt, and during his reign as pontiff was attempting to reverse some of the ideas of Vatican II. Well, what ended up happening to him?
I don't know.
He stepped down.
He was forced to step down so that Francis could become pope.
Why didn't they just kill him like they did, the other guys?
Because it's
I
not.
thought he
as
stepped
easy
down because of his health.
He's still alive.
Yeah, that's true.
John Paul II, they were propping up, and he was good and senile to where at his last mass you couldn't understand a word he was saying, whether you spoke Latin or not.
Or Polish.
Yeah.
You know.
And for all you know, he was telling stories about playing soccer in Poland as a child instead of reciting the canon.
Yeah.
Because he was.
Wow.
That's a good takeout. Front of the reels.
Gosh, you just
We're here with the Reverend Aaron Long.
made fun of a senile old man dying.
Here's Aaron Long's take on the Pope. Jump on the second eye. Enjoyed his last days.
Wow. Well, how does the RCC in Mount Airy get away with doing it in Latin? Aren't they actually in violation of the infallibility of the Pope?
Well, see, that was the neat thing about Benedict. Benedict, before he stepped down, opened up.
Down.
Correct.
They can't see you do the quotes, Scott.
Yeah, air quotes, finger quotes, yeah.
He did. Okay.
Opened up a possibility for the Latin Mass to be said in the 1960 missal form at Masses for the faithful.
Oh, so that was one of Benedict's trying to reform.
Correct.
The loophole.
The interesting thing about that is he required it to be not the Novus Ordo, which is what the new Mass is called, but the 1962 Missal. Now, you may look at me and go, preacher, what in the world does that mean?
Is it Soviet or American? It doesn't carry a nuclear payload.
Number one, you commie bastard. We aren't talking about the Soviets here. We got rid of them a long time
You
ago.
said missile.
Long live Putin. Maybe he'll become the
missive.
czar.
Okay.
I'm waiting for an Orthodox bishop to crown him czar, and then we can go back to the good old days.
That would be very interesting, actually. That's totally an end game for Putin. But I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. Let's continue. What is and you said missile?
Missile
I was
is
making a pun.
You said
all right,
missive. Okay.
in the Roman Catholic Communion. They take Mass daily. They take communion daily. Now, us heathen Protestants only do it quarterly because, well, God abandoned us a long time ago. But
that was sarcasm, right? What?
you can interpret that whatever way you want.
World of the unexplained.
Anyway, the Missal is the collection of daily readings for the daily Mass. The Gospel lesson, the Epistle lesson, the tracts, the introits, the graduals, the secrets, all of it. Okay. Oh, yeah, it's scary stuff. I'll let you read mine when you come over to the office one day.
Okay.
You can learn the deep, dark secrets of the 1962 Missal. They're boring. But anyway, the Missal, and it's Missal.
Like a dismissal, like a...
Right.
Okay,
Without the dis. A missile without the dis.
Missile.
Correct.
Like,
The 1962 Missal was the last Vatican I Missal produced, and Benedict XVI did that so that they could not force the Latin version of the Novus Ordo. Novus Ordo is one of those big scary words too.
Novus Ordo.
The new order.
The New
right?
Order, yeah.
Like New World Order.
Correct.
Or like that band from the 80s. New Order.
That has to be some new wave.
It is new wave.
Okay, we're not talking.
It's
to you
fun because the band that followed Joy Division.
That's just about as bad as Scott being into hair bands.
Well, Joy Division was like
not quite, but just about.
Well, they're goth. Okay.
But we can
I'm
accept.
not going to go into that. All right.
All right.
New order.
The adults are talking.
Don't you talk to me like that. Don't you talk about Spider-Man like that, bro. I don't know where that came from. Go ahead. I really don't. Actually, it's pretty close to a break.
Senile Trent Lackey.
No.
We take a lot of breaks on this show.
We
take
do.
4.
No, we take 3 actually.
1, 2, 3, and 4.
We take 3.
No, we have the
3.
one after the show too.
Well, that's not really a break.
It's the end of the show.
I thought that was just where Trent went and drank in the parking lot.
No, it
Talk
is.
about my after show activities, Aaron. My gosh. Wow. I'm a professional.
I said after the show.
Better than during.
Well, Scott, not everybody can hold their liquor the way you can.
That's true. Someone Nolan. Talk about that Pope that's thrown in the river. So, it's really a Pope this time.
We have moved well off the topic.
Well, when we come back on, I want to talk a little bit about exorcisms and
talk about the Orthodoxy.
I can come back and we can
true.
talk
Okay.
about both.
All right.
I don't
That's
care.
We're completely leaving the whole religious group out.
yeah, true. All right.
Okay.
Well,
It's called leaving the hang and dangle, so you can draw them back in.
the hang and dangle. Oh, come on, Trent. No quip comment.
I don't. No, I was thinking that's a good one. I can't really. It's a hanging dangle.
You just can't top that.
No, not really.
Have you come up with a thing for Winston?
It's like when your mama and daddy tease you into eating your Brussels sprouts and broccoli by offering you dessert.
Brussels sprouts are nasty. I would just forego the dessert.
They're just little cabbages, man.
They're horrible.
They're disgusting.
They are disgusting.
They're just little cabbages.
They're not
They're
little
fine.
cabbage. I like cabbage. I
Well,
don't like
my
Brussels sprouts.
grandmother
If you cook
caught
them-
me
if you cook
eating
them like cabbage, they'll
green
taste
meat
like
one
cabbage.
time and told me that anything that was green was probably bad for me. So I've just sort of stuck to that all
Well,
my
there we
life.
go. It works. George Bush didn't like broccoli. George Senior.
He's clearly some kind of Godzilla monster. But,
No.
which is a reference to my childhood.
Well, he
about
did
broccoli.
vomit on the Japanese.
Oh my gosh! And then there's that
Remember
other
that.
thing where George W. Bush was the same place and he's pulling on the door, in the Imperial Palace, and they film him and he can't get out and he looks really stupid at the camera, and then he pulls harder on the door like somehow it's going to open. Just the
Well,
Bush
that's
is-
because Karl Rove is actually in league with Darth Vader to prop up that whole group.
Oh yeah, well the Bushes clearly have they got trouble in
Anyway.
Japan.
George Senior's scary.
I feel like there's a really good one-liner about Bushes in Japan.
Anyway,
All right. Well, look. You're listening to
moving
World,
along.
you're listening to World of the Unexplained. We'll be back in just a second after this. And we're back. You're listening to World of the Unexplained. We're here tonight with Pastor Aaron Long.
Reverend Aaron Long. Right, Reverend.
The Right Reverend. Kind of like Bishop Sean Manchester. The Right Reverend Bishop Manchester.
Oh, that's true. We
Yes.
did call him that.
We did, yeah.
I was actually just joking about the right part.
I don't have to add right.
No.
Reverend is okay.
But you do have to call me Reverend.
Do I have to?
You also have to add Esquire to the end of Scott's name.
That's
Do I
right.
have to?
Yes, Esquire.
Oh God, I want
It's
something.
like
to
Bill
add
and
before
Ted's
I
Excellent
forget.
Adventure.
Like something real. Well, look, we only have a couple more minutes, and I realize that you just maybe skimmed the surface, or at least had a decent scoop of.
I will have you
Vatican
back
II, learning.
Getting some learning.
Yeah, I want to talk about one group that we have not covered, a group that you and I have studied extensively, and that are those
That are.
That
What are
Well,
that?
I just want to talk about them Orthodoxy. Russian, Greek, Armenian. There's a whole religious group that we
What
have
we
not.
like to call the true church.
Also, that's how you feel the truth.
The longer I studied the subject matter, yes, that's how I feel.
Okay, so basically you're saying that the Orthodoxy are less corrupted by the taint of the Masonic orders.
I'm saying the Orthodoxy are less corrupted on a whole than most of the others.
Well, that's interesting.
Outside of the Russian church within Russia that the Communist Party basically made into their patsies.
Yeah. So, but like the Greek Orthodox, Armenian Orthodox, all the Orthodoxies you find in Eastern Europe, basically. And why do you think that is, I guess?
I think it's because they have maintained a strict adherence to the patristic fathers. They also have a couple of different ways of looking at things. that aren't common within Western Christianity anymore.
Okay, such as?
Number one, in Orthodoxy, they believe that everything is tradition, but they believe that the inspired and inerrant word of the Bible is the first point of tradition. Therefore, the Bible is guarded in Orthodoxy by a series of hedges, which would be the liturgies, which would be the iconography, which would be the apostolic succession, which would be the prayers to Mary and the saints, to where you have a harder time coming into it. Number two, in Orthodoxy, the priests are all required to be married if they're serving in local congregations, but all the bishops must come from one of the monastic houses. Therefore, the leadership within the church is coming from the monastic houses that have been forced to remain pure due to the nature of Orthodox monasticism. See, in Western monasticism, you have this great movement where the monks, starting with St. Francis and St. Dominic, were coming out of the monasteries and going out amongst the people to where they could be corrupted. And Eastern Orthodoxy, and Western Orthodoxy for that matter, the monks stay within their cloistered societies because they view their calling as being they are there to pray for the salvation of the world. Therefore, you don't get as much corruption because the monks don't come outside of their monasteries until they get elected bishop.
That's true. And then also, I would imagine you would also have less sex scandals, maybe, amongst the...
Well, the priests are married.
Yeah. It's interesting. So how does that fly with the Catholic Church then? I mean, I realized at some point we had a split a long time ago, but how's the Pope and the Catholics feel about the Orthodoxy? I mean,
well, the Pope has made overtures ever since Vatican II to the Orthodox Church. You got to remember, within Roman Catholicism, there were always what were called Byzantine Catholics, which practiced a form of Orthodoxy within the Roman Communion. After Vatican II, they started making overtures toward the Orthodox Church, which have been, for the most part, rejected outside of the ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople.
You mean Istanbul? Is it still Constantinople? Is that what I mean?
Istanbul, Constantinople.
That's exactly right.
We're not getting into Mehmed II.
Oh, Mehmed II. Anyway, go ahead. So basically, the Catholics are trying to say, "Hey, man, I'm sorry about 1053. Let's get back together, baby."
Yeah,
what it is, really?
That's about it.
Okay. Sorry.
But
Man,
Orthodoxy believes, in and of its very nature, that they maintain the true faith that has come from Christ through the apostles to the bishops. Therefore, they believe that ecumenism is nothing but flying in the face of Christ, because that would mean diluting the true faith.
I mean, there's a historical context to this too, because, you could also make the argument that the Eastern Europe didn't have Freemason guilds or guilds in general. I mean, the whole society was not shaped in the same way that Western Europe was, so there's no guilds in Eastern Europe. The Black Death didn't hit them as hard. I mean, that's another thing entirely.
The glories of Byzantium.
Yeah, exactly. The Byzantines, which is what they base their religious beliefs off of, right?
Correct. They also have this idea in their theology of Christus Victor. In Western society, you have an emphasis on the nature of Christ upon the cross, to the point of excluding just about everything else, which makes Jesus a much more human figure to the exclusion of his divine nature. In Orthodoxy, the idea of Christus Victor is that Christ not only died for the salvation of our sins, but also conquered hell, death, and the devil in the process. So what you have is an emphasis on the divine nature of Christ. In this idea of the divine nature of Christ, and in this idea of the importance of the mystery of the Holy Trinity, instead of getting into the definition of the Holy Trinity, what you see is a faith less prone to be corrupted, because in their minds, to change what has been passed down from Jesus and the disciples and the apostles would be to fly and to spit in the face of God.
That's very interesting, and I think I can that also ties in with the humanism and the Freemasons and the Enlightenment movement, also in Western Europe, where you try to analyze and dissect things scientifically.
Correct.
Right? And so in Eastern Europe, therefore, what you're saying is that kind of concept was just, you don't sit there and analyze and dissect it, and if you do, that's where the corruption comes in.
Right, but I mean, you got to remember, all of these concepts go back to where these versions of Christianity were planted and grew.
Mm-hmm.
Byzantine Christianity, true Orthodoxy, grew from a Greek mindset where you have this idea of the mystery of things.
Mm-hmm.
You don't call them sacraments in Orthodoxy, you call them mysteries.
Yep.
The Eucharist is a mystery. Baptism and chrismation, ordination and marriage, confession, all of these things are the mysteries of the faith. Whereas the Western Church grew up from a Latin perspective, which is much more legalistic, Scott.
Yes.
And you have this codification of laws, of rules, to where the very spirit and essence of the faith gets overrun by all of these books of canon law, and where humanity becomes ascendant, because it is the ability to interpret and to read these canons of law that becomes the most important element, instead of dwelling in the mystery of the presence of Christ.
And that would lead to a lot. Well, I would think by that point that I'm basically drawing the logic here that the orthodoxies, because there's numerous of them,
Well,
they're more prone to monasticism too, and wandering, searching for, right?
Right, and there's a movement going on within the church that I've really embraced lately called Western Orthodoxy, which is a revival of the pre-schism West's liturgies, devotions, and practices.
Okay. It's interesting. This seems like a question that Scott would ask, really.
Uh-oh.
So...
Well, he's clearly not paying you any attention
he's
right
not.
now,
I'm
Trent.
just going to look at him for a minute. They can't see me looking at him, but I'm looking at him right now.
I have a question for Aaron. I'm just
okay. Well, here's
I'm just googling it. So
okay, let me think of my question. So this is a Scott, with his emphasis on revelations and stuff like that. If you think that the Roman Catholic Church is corrupted and continuing to be corrupted, granted, there's whatever. What were they called again? Those people.
The Sede Vaticanus.
Sede Vaticanus. I thought I written down there somewhere. Yeah, I did. Even though that's there, then when the end times come, is it your theory that basically it's the Orthodoxy that's going to rise up and and serve as the flag bearers for Christianity?
I believe in the concept of the church triumphant and the church militant.
Okay.
This all stems from St. Augustine, who is a pre-schism saint.
Mm-hmm.
In the church militant, what you have is the church that exists on earth right now. In the church triumphant, you have those Christian souls who have gone on to their everlasting reward.
Okay.
Well, within the church militant, there is this idea that Jesus started out with about the wheat and the tares. And in the parable of the wheat and the tares, Jesus speaks of how the farmer goes out to sow his seed, and the farmer sows good seed. Well, while the farmer is asleep at night, the enemy comes in and sows weeds among the wheat. When they start to come up, the harvesters see the weeds among the wheat, and they go to the master and they ask him, "Shall we go and pull up the weeds?" The master says to the harvesters, "No, for if you pull up the weeds, you may disturb the wheat. Wait until the harvest, and when the harvest is accomplished, we will separate the wheat into the barns, and we will throw the weeds into the fire." What Jesus says this means is that there is coming a time when the weeds and the wheat will have reached their full growth. And at that time, the harvesters, who are the angels, shall come down and reap. And when the reaping occurs, the weeds shall be separated out unto the everlasting fires of hell, which are the corrupt within the church militant, and the wheat shall be brought into the barn, which is the eternal heaven. So, to answer your question in a very simple fashion without being preachy, I believe that when Christ returns, there will be true believers in all forms of Christianity.
Okay.
I just believe that the predominance of them will come from the Orthodox Church due to its nature.
Okay. That's a good answer too.
I'm good.
You didn't
Yeah.
have a question?
I did, but I'll just save it.
You should just. Is it about exorcisms?
No.
Because I mean, that's not a lot of time to talk about exorcisms.
No, it's not.
talk
We
about
got we got
exorcism.
10,
No,
we
no,
got
no,
10
let's
minutes.
not.
We'll do that another show. We'll do another show.
Well, what was your question?
It was just don't worry about it.
I was waiting.
I don't know if this is the correct verse that I found, and that's why I'm going to have to look at it
You're
again.
some Bible quoting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if it's exactly what I was looking for. So anyway, I'll save that for later.
Okay, so
Scott is a very devout holy roller on Sundays.
Thanks.
Notice I said on Sundays because he's a lawyer 6 other days of the week.
well, he's looking to get that little hut in heaven. No, mansion,
The cardboard box.
No, it's the mansion, right?
As long as I get in, man, I don't care.
How the joke goes. Lawyer getting in. Anyway, I'm not going to tell the joke right now, but
How are you going to be able to live without Leanne? Because she's probably going to make it to some other level of heaven.
I don't know. We'll talk
okay,
from time
Dante,
to
with
time.
your levels of heaven.
Because she's put up with you all these years.
That's true. She deserves a crown for that at least.
I want to hang out in Purgatory. That's all right with you. The top level. The Garden
top
of Eden.
level?
Yeah, that's where I'm going to hang out. It's the Garden of Eden. You can come visit me from your little glowing lights in the sky. So, whenever you want to. I'll have tigers and giraffes hanging out with me. It'll be awesome.
I plan on just contemplating the beatific vision.
Oh, I don't want to see that.
How close do you think we are to the end times? In your own personal belief?
In my own personal belief, I believe that there is no way of knowing when the end times are going to come. Jesus himself said that he didn't even know.
And it's true that even the apostles, a lot of them were looking for it
Right.
shortly after he left.
People have been looking for the end times to come since Christ came.
Sure.
Yeah, you know what? I'm totally on board with that because there's so many people who say, "Oh, Jesus is coming soon. Jesus is coming soon."
They've been saying that for a long time.
Yeah, and it's like,
Oh, Hal Lindsey really screwed up, right? Great Lake Planet Earth, 1979.
But just because he screwed up did not mean that there weren't some truths
Oh, sure.
contained in
No,
the
I
book.
agree.
well, I mean, there's a hope.
It's a great book. Still think it's a
hope
great book.
that he's coming, but in the end, he doesn't know. I mean, how do you know the mind of God?
You don't.
Okay.
Exactly.
Here's
bring the whole thing
a
full-
good question for you. All right, check this out. All right. Now it says only my Father knows when I'm coming back. Right.
Right.
Question is, when he said that, he was still here on Earth, right?
Right.
Since we have the Trinity, does he know now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I don't see how that's gonna-
yeah. All right, fine.
But
I thought
I
it was
mean,
a cooler question.
when
than
was
that.
the last time that Jesus walked into the room and started talking with you, Scott?
I'll have to ask my buddy Jimmy Carter. He's done that living room thing with Christ.
I'm pretty sure if that happened, I would immediately
I'd freak out. Yeah.
I might die of a heart attack.
Well, that's been,
sorry.
with contemporary Christian music, there's this song that drives me insane, which is I'll dance for you, Jesus, or in all of you be still. Will I sing hallelujah? And I can't remember the rest of the words. The thing is there's a heresy in that song because at the name of Jesus Christ, every knee shall bow.
Yeah, sure.
There ain't going
No, you'd
to
be
be
on the
any
floor.
dancing in front of Jesus.
Exactly. So, that almost kind of reminds me of like John the Baptist being betrayed by a dancer. I think
Right.
maybe Jesus might frown upon dancing in general.
When I was in the
That-
Christian school as a child, we did not dance when we read the plays and stuff. We skipped because dancing is not right.
Isn't skipping a form of dancing though?
I don't know, man.
All right, so we got a couple more minutes here. Vatican II. I mean,
Well, I want to bring this all the way back around.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay?
All right, I'm listening.
Because Fatima ends with this idea that what Mary is saying to the children is not that Christ is going to return. It is the idea that there will be great devastations and desolations, and God shall pour his wrath out upon his people. Because what you have is this idea that God is angry. And as I have studied Fatima, as I've read into all these documents, as I've seen the world events as they're occurring today, it is not the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel that I turn to. It is the book of Jeremiah and the book of Isaiah. And in especially Jeremiah, who was known as the weeping prophet, what we see is not Christ's imminent return. What we see is God's anger with his covenant people. For I believe on a level that America was founded under a covenant with God.
True.
If you read our founding fathers'
you're right.
documents,
You're
whether
correct.
they were Deist Masons or Christians, they had this idea of covenant.
Covenant with God, you're right.
And as I read the Old Testament, what I see is as God's covenant people betrayed and broke the covenant. Read the book of Judges. It happens over and over again. Does God come and destroy them all? No. What God does is he sends a scourge. And as I look at the political activities that are occurring in modern society, what I see is God once again raising up the Assyrians and the Babylonians, which are the ancient names for Iraq and Iran.
Barack Obama!
And the Philistines, which is the ancient name for the Palestinians, to lash out against our interest. And as time progresses, what I'm seeing is God using his sword of justice upon his covenant people, because his covenant people
have been disobedient,
have become and played the harlot. I don't know, most people don't realize this, but the term adultery in the Old Testament is used much more about the Israelites abandoning God for other gods and goddesses than it ever is in the marriage circumstance.
Interesting. That's a lot of stuff. I mean,
it's a bunch of stuff, yeah. It is.
It's a bunch of stuff. That's a bunch of stuff that happened.
Well, you know, it's gotten really serious in the Middle East right now. A lot of crazy things are going on over there. Who knows what part we're going to play in that? I know, obviously, we've done some, you know, some bombings there and stuff like that. But I don't know, you know, what, you know, where this is, what it's all coming to a head from. I know the United States, you know, we're in a place where I've always been weary of you know, electronic, or excuse me, not electronic, electromagnetic pulses and things like that.
The Tesla coil.
The Tesla coil?
No.
Oh, well.
No, the EMP bomb.
The EMP bomb, you know.
I
mean, I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I mean, I think that the unguarded border situation that we have, we're inviting terrorists into America to possibly, you know, really, really hurt us in a bigger way than 9/11 ever did. And that bothers me. America will change if something like that happens. And I don't know what that means, that we become isolationists, or does that mean that, you know, something will change. I think my opinion is that something will change to take us out of the reason that you don't hear about us or read about us in the Bible in the end days is because something has changed to move us in a different place than where we are today. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what
we're looking like we're going to become another empire on the scrap heap of history.
Like Rome, yeah.
Or France, or England.
And we're just...
Don't talk about England like that.
And the problem
They're
is...
still totally viable.
The American people are so stupid that they will be dancing as it burns because they have no clue.
Well, Nero fiddled as Rome burned.
Yes. Yeah. So
he also blamed it on the Christians and
of course
tied them to stakes, dipped them in tar, and used them to light his celebrations.
Oh, wow. How nice.
Man, nobody threw a party better than Nero, though, right?
And you wonder why you're going to be in purgatory.
Oh, I can tell you right now why.
For that line. Oh my gosh.
That's what I was going to say. Oh wow. Well, that brings us to the close of tonight's show. I'll give you the last word, Reverend Long.
Yeah, last word, something pithy.
Well, the only word I have to share is get your heart right. Because you know neither the day nor the hour, but you do know that one day you're going to be called before the judgment seat of Christ. And when you are, you will be called to account for every idle word you've spoken and every idle action that you have done. So make sure you're right when you get there.
It's going to take a while.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine down upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
World of the Unexplained. All right. Thanks, Aaron. Right. We appreciate you. And our listeners out there, we appreciate you as well. Yeah. Please feel free to download this and pass it along to your friends.
Scott does. I don't know about Trent.
Well, I appreciate you guys. You know that. You people know that. I'm looking right at you now.
Now they're your people? You people? I mean, no.
Oh my gosh, Scott.
You're listening to World of the Unexplained. This is Jay Scott.
This is Trent Lackey. I don't have anything pithy about Winston-Salem, but I'm working on it.
All right. You've been working on it now for quite a while. I understand. All right. Guys, we'll see you guys next week. Have a nice one.
Next week?
I mean, the week after next. You know what I mean. It's all good. Good night.